Alrighty, let's go. We're back with even more of the Bionicle Inspiration series, and we're continuing this awesome Mahri collab from a whole bunch of different builders who have reimagined many of the different characters from the Mahri wave of LEGO Bionicle sets. And these are just such beautiful MOCs that I had to dedicate a whole bunch of episodes to them because I love them. They're really cool, and you guys certainly seem to be enjoying them as well. But don't worry, HF Feb stuff will be coming this weekend, so that has not been forgotten. Do not worry. Let's just dive into the very first one, shall we? We're focusing on the Matoran in this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series, where we spotlight MOCs from across the community to inspire you. And it's sort of Matoran and other sort of like adjacent sort of like smaller sets and other kind of characters. You'll see what I mean as we dive into the episode, which let's do right now. The very first one we've got today is Deka, and this is by Anthony Wilson. I have a lot of fun memories with this set, actually. I remember playing with him after school a whole bunch for just months. Him and another one that we'll get to later on in the episode. A set that I have a lot of fun memories with. He's really cool, and he's been reimagined in a really fun way here. I love the way of sort of reimagining the torso design here with a lot more kind of like smaller and more complex pieces in that sense, using some of these Nexo Knight shields, which of course were the shields on the characters within the Nexo Knights theme of LEGO sets, and using them there for that sort of I guess that sort of like angled look of that torso piece there that was on the original set. It's a nice way of translating that, but still kind of branching off in a new direction with it as well. It's a clever design, and just overall is a very nice torso. I love the way of reimagining the limbs, which again I would argue are still relatively similar to the original, but again Anthony's put his own unique twist on them. I like the fact that they're simply just some of those lightsaber bars and a few other different pieces there, and it gives it this real sort of like slimmed down look here. Which I think it makes a lot of sense on a little Matoran character. They don't really have a huge amount of powers. They can still hold their own, but like they're not Toa, you know what I mean? So I like the fact that it is a little bit more sort of spindly in that sense there. It's a nice design. I also really like the way he's reimagined that Zamosphere launcher there. A lot more sort of system pieces integrated there to do it, but it's a nice sort of slimmed down version of that sort of turret that he has on his shoulder there, which looks gorgeous. A fun thing that I also enjoy with this is just how little Kit Orange there is on this. Kit Orange, of course, being the sort of yellowish color here, which is that sort of like orangey yellow. The fact that it's just the mask, that sort of smaller Kit Orange CCBS shell, and then a few system pieces on the upper leg, and that's it. Not much. And again, similar to the set. But I think it's nice to know that even if you have a very slimmed back amount of a specific color of piece, maybe you've got one cool mask in like teal, for example, but you've got like a couple other teal pieces and not much to do with it. You could do something very similar to this, build a bit of a smaller MOC, and then just put little subtle hints of that one color and just sort of block it out just on the legs or on the face or, other areas of the MOC. And you can still more or less get away with it and still use those really awesome colors. So don't be afraid if you've got more limited supplies of certain colors. You can still do some pretty cool stuff with them, much like we see on this MOC here. So yeah, adore how this looks. Great way of reimagining what was a really awesome character. Let's move over now to a MOC by Rockmonster 2000, and this is Locks. So the gun on this is my favorite thing, I think. It uses some ball joints in red for the sort of like ammunition that's inside them, but these sort of like silver, sort of like bowl kind of pieces here. Obviously they come in a variety of different things. I think one of the earliest sets that they came in was the Parisian restaurant. You can see them here as these little like flower pots in dark red. Of course there's silver in this, but there's a variety of different ways you can get that piece. But it's nice to see it being used here for a very effective sort of like blaster of sorts. It kind of reminds me of, obviously the original set there. It certainly looks like Zamospheres, but it's a different way of doing it, and that's always a great way of approaching a revamp, is, adding your own little personal touches like that. I love the tail design, just using some of those mixel joints and then putting some cheese slopes on it, and then just sort of, spamming that a few times there to give it this almost sort of like scorpion tail look. It's a very slim, sort of stripped back, simplistic design, but it works. Gets the job done. It looks a little bit more sort of like mechanical. It's just a nice design. I also enjoy the sort of way that they've reimagined the face here with almost sort of like two different eyes and this big sort of like clawed mouth of sorts. It's it's weird, but it's wonderful. But I really like what I guess you could kind of refer to as like a third eye, or maybe the brain or something. This printed 2x2 tile. I love how that looks. I've recently been building some stuff that has required printed tiles and different things, and it blows my mind how much when you do get to like stickers or printed tiles or any kind of printed piece for that matter, it doesn't have to just be tiles, how much it can drastically shift the mark. Lego makes so many fantastic printed elements or stickers and things like that, and when you can introduce it, it can just do so much for the mark. I mean, you know, you see it on heaps of like Lego sets and different things. It's like, oh, there's a whole grocery store, and look, there's a milk carton, there's this box of cereal or whatever like that, and certainly that sort of same logic can be applied to a Bionicle there. It does a lot, and I just really like how that looks. That sort of technological element here that is almost sort of a focal point for this mark. It's really, really pretty. So yeah, a great way of revamping what was a pretty small, simple set, but given him a lot more life with this revamp here. It's really cool. On to the next one. This is by Brick Diamonds, and this is, of course, Deflect. This is the other one I used to play with a lot after school. He was fun. I enjoy this little character here. I always thought he has such a cool mask as well. And it's nice to see how this mask has been slightly reimagined by giving it this sort of like almost like dorsal fin of sorts on the top. I guess it's a nice way of kind of tying it back to that sort of underwater setting of the Toamaru, which I guess when you're revamping them, there's an element of that you have to remember, right? You know, do you give them tubings that they can breathe, or do you give them some sort of like underwater aesthetic or thing like this, like a fin of some kind? How do you want to kind of bring to life that underwater quality in the character? And I think that's a very subtle detail, because the rest of it doesn't look super like aquatic in that sense. Yet that is a nice little finishing touch that sells it well. Some other stuff with this MOC that is awesome is the like kind of axe weapon that they've got here. I just love how that looks. I like that it's a little bit more sort of like slim and tiny, so it kind of fits with the scale of this build here. But it's lovely seeing that sort of curved tile piece there, forming this sort of elegant curved blade of sorts. Just looks so cool. Another thing that I think is cool is just how many of these Lord of the Rings rings are being used here, these beautiful chrome gold rings. We can see them sort of on the legs, also on that sort of like waistcloth thing that he's got going there, which looks like just a grey, or actually probably 2 or 3 of those grey minifigure capes just sort of wrapped around a little bit to give him this this nice sort of ornate dress of sorts. Looks really nice. Yeah, and then of course there's a few more Lord of the Rings rings on the feet as well to sort of form that connection between that nice little cupcake piece that gives him some nice little little detailing there on the bottom of his pants, and then the Lord of the Rings ring helps it transition into that little tooth plate piece there. It looks fantastic. But yeah, I love seeing some of those chrome gold details on this, because once again, they're tiny, they're subtle, you can almost miss them. But when you do notice them, that little slight pop of that shiny gold there does a lot for this MOC. And those Lord of the Rings rings are really interesting pieces too, because, you know, you can, of course, insert a stud on both sides of it there. So, you know, it's nice too, because you get to play with them and take advantage of that really awesome technique that you can do with them there. So it's nice to see them scattered all throughout the MOC, so that you can play with them in multiple ways, whether it's just, you know, color or actually incorporating them into the build to get some nice techniques. So a very nice little detail there. And it's also cool to see how some microphone pieces have been used to insert this Ogrim headpiece on the torso there. That makes some surprisingly nice looking sort of chest armor of sorts. And it looks like it's just attached by putting those 2 little microphones with the gold top on them into the sort of little like cheek holes that were on that Ogrim mask there. Yeah, that additional little extra bit of gold there helps sort of balance out the gold on the MOC. It's very, very nice to see. I also like the fact that the Ogrim torso has that more sort of like scaly, like ogre, like boiled kind of look to the mask. Yeah, when you kind of combine that with the fin on the top of the head, it almost looks like this is more like a mermaid, merperson, merman, aquatic sort of like being of sorts. Like maybe, you know, I don't know, they've sort of played with the story a little bit more, like they live here, they're more of a fish person in that sense, and they have more of that fish aesthetic as a result. I think that's a great idea, and that's really basically just being conveyed through like 2 pieces there. It's a clever way of doing it. So yeah, all in all, this is a fantastic MOC with a lot of nice little tiny details that help just sort of elevate it to a new level. It's really, really nice. On to the next one now. This is by Ao Okononen, and this is Morak. The color scheme on this is beautiful. It's using some pieces that came on the Elsa Castle set here. Not all of them come on that set. I think those sort of like scaly bits on the back that sort of transition onto the head, those sort of like kind of sort of triangular-like pieces there. I don't believe the Elsa Castle comes with those, but the castle does come with basically all the other satin translight blue, I believe it's called, which is this awesome new color that almost has this sort of like glittery kind of like sparkle effect to the translucentness of the piece there. It's a gorgeous color if you've not come across it yet. It's still relatively uncommon, I would argue. I don't know, it comes in like dots, it comes in that. Can't really think of much else that color appears in. I'm sure I'm blanking. I'm sure there's other sets it comes in, but still, it's a relatively new color in that sense. But seeing it on here is fantastic. It certainly seems very reminiscent of the original color scheme that this character had, which was the little subtle bits of that sort of blue glow-in-the-dark color that was on like Nocturne and things like that. So a lovely inclusion of a recent piece here, and there is something about it that does seem almost like that kind of bioluminescence that you would see on underwater creatures. So yeah, great way to be using some new pieces, and also just the ways that those have been used are beautiful too. The way that sort of windscreen piece forms this big old open mouth, like I was saying before, those pieces form like scales or something like that. It's really, really cool to see. Some other stuff that's really cool to see on this MOC is the tail gun that he's got here. There is a really interesting part use here. It is a Duplo oil can. Here it is on Bricklink if you want to look further into that piece specifically. What an awesome part use. I think that's such an interesting thing with Duplo. A lot of it can be difficult to use in your system-focused MOCs, but then you get weird pieces like this oil can or something like that where it can be beautifully integrated, and it looks like a gun of sorts here. It's beautiful. So yeah, by all means, take a look at your Duplo sets or go on Bricklink and look up certain obscure Duplo pieces and things like that and see if you can work it into your Bionicle MOC, because hey, stuff like that is just so clever and so pleasing to see. A brilliant way of revamping the tail there. It's gorgeous. Another nice part use is on the leg design. We can see these dark blue windscreen pieces here. Now these came on an Aqua Raiders set. It was on this sort of big squid here. I again had this set as a kid, played with it a bunch. It was very fun. And yeah, it's great to see them being used as the sort of, I guess, kind of like claw flippery things of sorts. I don't know how you describe it, but it looks cool, and seeing the four of them like that there works beautifully with this design. So another slightly obscure piece, I suppose, but it's being used in a very, very clever way here to achieve an awesome looking leg design. I adore it. Very, very cool. Let us move over to the next one. This is by Locky MOCs, and this is Sada. So at first I was like, who's this guy? But then obviously I looked into it a little bit more and I remembered. So of course the Karzani set had two Matoran in the set, and this was one of them. So hey, if you're revamping almost every character from that wave of Mahri, the Mahri wave, as it's actually called, why not take a look at these characters and see how you could reimagine them? And this is a great way of reimagining this character. It's so different and so exciting. So right off the bat, I love the head design here, which is Jala and Nika's mask, but it's been flipped upside down. And of course, the very top of Jala's mask had those two kind of like gaps that helped you sort of see the lime details underneath. Just the way that a lot of those Nika masks were made there. But yeah, just completely remove that line bit. You don't need it. Instead, we're going to shove pieces into that gap there and make a funky, cool looking head design out of it. I think that's so clever, and I love seeing people do that with masks. It's something you can do with actually quite a lot of them, especially some of those earlier masks as well, where you can just shove things into the different holes and places within those masks, and you get some nice results. So yeah, a very, very clever take on the mask there. It looks nothing like the original, but who cares? It looks really cool. I also enjoy the torso design here. Of course, it's got a few stickers on it, but it's also got some of those different greeble details and things there, and that looks really cool. It sort of seems appropriate for some sort of underwater diving suit. I'm sure there's some sort of mechanisms there that help power the suit or give you readouts of oxygen or something like that. So some stickers and some other sort of multicolored details and knobs and printed tiles and things like that certainly goes a long way there and looks gorgeous. Another thing I enjoy is the upper legs here. These are the torsos of Vakama, or just a Metru torso in dark red, of course. And it makes for a nice sort of like upper thigh design there. It looks really nice. Another thing that was also really cool is the weapon design here. So when we just take a look at the arm in general, there's some of these grey, kind of like riot shield pieces. I always remember those came as like riot shields for like a first order battle pack in white, and they've since appeared in other colors in many different things. But having them there is sort of like, I don't know, some sort of just part of like a glove of sorts. But then when we look at the other arm, I was trying to say glove and arm, and then it just turned into gun. Anyway, we can see that he's sort of attached a almost like Wolverine claw onto that shield piece there. So I like the idea that he has these like specialized like gloves of sorts where you can, attach or detach weapons to, make it cool. I don't know. It's a nice design there, and it certainly seems like you could attach anything you want onto that. So if you're the kind of person that when you like to build your Bionicle MOCs, you like to go really ham and give them thousands of different weapons, maybe a hand design similar to this is something you could consider, because you might be able to just envision all sorts of really cool hand-based weapons around them there. That's a very nice design that seems open for a lot of customization. It's really cool. On to a MOC by Matoran now, and this is Idris. So I like the kind of mermaid aesthetic here, and the fact that it's also kind of got like a breath mask and other sort of like scuba gear as well. You can see the like oxygen tanks on the back and stuff there. Really, really clever. I just love how that looks. I think the idea of, how would these characters sort of retrofit themselves so that they can actually breathe underwater? What sort of stuff would they do? Is it something as simple as, well, they've got a scuba gear on? Or do they completely rebuild their bodies and give themselves mermaid tails sort of thing? It's a cool idea, that's for sure. And certainly a very different way of approaching the more sort of like humanoid design of the majority of these characters within the Mahri wave there. So very creative and very clever. Some other stuff I enjoy on this MOC is the fact that it uses a whole bunch of dark blue CCBS shell pieces. A lot of it makes up that mermaid tail. You can also see it on the arms there as well. I almost forgot that dark blue CCBS shells existed. I think they only come on like a couple sets there. It's not hugely common. But man, dark blue CCBS armor just looks nice. No specific advice with that of just like, oh, maybe, buy these sets to get it or do whatever. It's just, hey, dark blue CCBS armor looks cool, and I don't think is hugely common. So it's lovely to see it being used on a MOC. It's really cool. I also enjoy the Heartlight here, using one of these sort of like diamond pieces here, which I believe came on a few of the old Lego Elves sets there. That's a really cool piece, and it certainly works well as some sort of Heartlight of sorts. It's pretty cool. So a great take on this character, and certainly reimagining them in a very fun and different way. On to the final MOC now. This is what I was talking about in the thumbnail. This is Squid Ammo, and it's by Optimus Convoy. So I don't know about you, but if you bought the Baraki sets or any of this wave, you probably would have come across the Squid launcher, which in my opinion, the worst of the Bionicle weapons. There's a lot of cool ones, your Zamisphere launchers, your Thornax launchers, all sorts of stuff. I enjoyed those. I thought most of them were pretty cool. But the Squid launchers, I remember always struggling with them as a kid. The Squids just wouldn't stay on if you just wanted them like loaded into the gun. If you tried to fire them, they just would go not where you wanted them to, or they just wouldn't fire at all. Personally, not my favorite piece or gimmick of these Lego sets here. The Squids were cool though. I remember playing with them in some fashion, like, oh, this is the Matoran are going to have some squid dinner tonight, whatever. But they're a pretty strange piece, that's for sure. And not super common seeing them used in MOCs. I can't really think of many off the top of my head, unless they actually have a squid launcher cannon in them. Cannon? I guess it's more of a crossbow. I don't know what you would refer to it as. But still, it's a pretty difficult to use piece. But it's awesome to see what was a staple of that wave be reimagined into something actually really awesome and cool. So definitely sized up. This one's a lot bigger than the original piece was here. And just looks great. Again, using a few different printed tiles and pieces here to form this awesome eye with that sort of cool swirling effect there. That looks great. And then a very similar effect there on the mouth. So it kind of, I don't know, to me that kind of looks like the back of its throat and sort of leading into the rest of the body there. It's a nice way of using what I think is some sort of like swirling power effects, like galaxy of sorts, some sort of printed piece. I don't recognize it specifically. I don't know what set that comes in, but when it's sort of hidden behind all of those teeth there, it certainly looks like the inside of its mouth there. So a great way of reimagining that printed piece there. It looks gorgeous. I also like the part spamming here of some of these macaroni pieces to form the sort of curvature of the squid's body there. That looks also very, very nice. And those macaroni pieces are just, they're such cool pieces. And this is a brilliant example of just how nice part spamming can look on any MOC. You certainly get that beautiful sort of curved aesthetic that you would see on this sort of type of creature there. And it's just from repeating one piece over and over again. Really, really cool. But yeah, it's awesome to see someone take something that is pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty boring, but turn it into something really impressive and really cool. And a great way of using a few different printed elements as well. Very, very nice. So that's it for this episode of the Mahri Collab. We'll finish it up next week, and then we'll be done with that, and we'll go back to our regular scheduled programming of the Bionicle Inspiration series. But stay tuned for HF Feb coming soon to you. If you want to submit some of your own MOCs to the show, you can do so through the email that's currently on your screen right now. You can also check the links in the description below for all of the MOCs featured in today's episode. Go check out some of the other stuff those builders have done. You will definitely have a good time if you do so. Thank you very much for watching. Happy building, and bye for now.